So I've watched the series of Naruto on and off ever since I was young. And of all the animation I've watched, this series is definitely up there as one of the best I've ever seen. From the iconic action and fighting scenes to the real-life concepts expressed in this series, it is truly an anime worth remembering. One of the best things that make this anime stand out, even till this day, is its characters. Naruto certainly has one of the widest range of unique characters throughout all of anime. From their designs to abilities and personalities, Kishimoto really did an outstanding job in making a cast of interesting characters that mostly stand out from one another. Unfortunately, that statement does not apply to one of Obito Uchiha, a character mired in constant debates about his strength, motivation, and personality, among other things. To be honest, I never really cared too much for Obito. For the longest, I couldn't quite wrap my head around him as a character. A once bright kid who experiences trauma and falls into a state of darkness, but is then later redeemed. A flawed character with layers too difficult to understand on the surface level. Obito has elements of a character that I would usually enjoy, but I don't. Now, granted, I understand this is all subjective. Right? I'm not trying to say you shouldn't like Obito as a character. Rather, I'm saying why I don't think he quite works as a character and why he's so heavily contested amongst fans of the series. Now, as for the reason why I thought Obito didn't work as a character, I wasn't sure for the longest, up until recently. And I think that reason can be summed up into one sentence. He doesn't have an identity of his own. Or rather, his quote-unquote personality/character arc is mainly a combination of 4 specific characters that I personally seen throughout the series. Those characters happen to be Gaara, Madara, Tobi, and Naruto. If Obito were a blank canvas, then it's these 4 characters that are the shades of coloring that make him who he is. And moving forward, I'll be breaking down why I think so. Starting out with the main character, Naruto is the most similar to a childhood Obito. Kakashi himself once said, when speaking to Obito, quote, "Your once strong will is still alive, right next to me," referring to Naruto, of course. "The only thing the current me can do is protect the current Naruto," end quote. Alright, so check this out. Both are headstrong, right? Both are noisy and energetic. Both were seen as untalented shinobis with strong work ethics. Both were seen as failures in their youth. Both were orphans. Both had laid back and skilled sensei, right? Both had a cold and talented rival. Both had an infatuation for the female character of the team. Hell, both originally wore goggles. Naruto and Obito share so many similarities, it's not even funny. Even if you look at the coloring of their clothing, right? They're basically just the primary and secondary colors switched or inverted. And therein lies the first problem. Obito was clearly written by Kishimoto to be the quote-unquote what if Naruto became evil character. The version of Naruto consumed by evil. Character who falls from grace only to be redeemed by the character who is most like him. Hold up. Wait a second. This kind of sounds familiar. Oh yeah, we've already seen this before. But before we go there, let's stay on point for a second, right? The insane amount of similarities between Naruto and Obito shows the first examples of the issues with Obito's character. His original template is literally based on the main character. They're damn near 1-to-1 in terms of similarities. Now, I'm not saying all characters need to be 100% unique within the same story in order for things to work. At least every other character comparison in Team 7 has noticeable differences though, right? Look at young Kakashi, right? Young Kakashi's parallel is to a young Sasuke, but their major difference is how they deal with grief. And Sasuke uses his trauma as motivation to fuel hatred and vengeance, whereas Kakashi doesn't respond to trauma in that matter. Whether it was the death of his father, Rin, Obito, or Minato. Not one time do we see Kakashi respond to these deaths in a vengeful or bitter way. Rather, it leads him to a state of isolation and depression. I mean, such traumatic experiences and how each character responds to them highlights the importance of individuality. Each character's response to certain events is what helps us as the viewers appreciate them more. Even Rin and Sakura hold key differences. While young Sakura is shown to be someone who is quick-tempered and lacking a lot of empathy, Rin is shown to be someone truly caring and joyful. These key differences, whether you see them as good or bad, do just enough to make each character stand out. Such is not shown with Obito. And because young Obito was introduced in the series long after we see Naruto, he seems like nothing more than a carbon copy of the protagonist, until his fall, that is. The fall of Obito changes his character drastically. After witnessing the tragic death of Rin, Obito laments that he's living in hell and essentially cuts ties to reality for the aim of achieving the infinite Tsukuyomi. It is here that we see Obito's new identity become influenced by one character, but then draws parallels to another. I'm of course talking about Madara and Gaara here, starting with the one known as the Ghost of the Uchiha. We can see the effects of Obito's personality becoming like Madara, as he quite literally impersonates him for the majority of the series. There was a Myers-Briggs personality typing for Madara that classified him as quote-unquote the commander in their list of classifications. Character traits exhibited by those with his personality type, as well as some others attributed to Madara, consist of self-confidence, they're said to be strategists, said to be strong-willed, ruthless, stubborn, intolerant, manipulative, and arrogant. You can certainly make the case that Obito, in his years of impersonating Madara, exhibited these traits perfectly, manipulating the Mizukage Yagura into heightening the murderous times of the Blood Mist Village, helping Itachi murder most members of the Uchiha clan, and initiating the Fourth Shinobi World War. During his tenure as Madara, Obito was able to convince the masses that he was in fact that ancient Uchiha by exhibiting such power and ruthlessness. He convinced the likes of Pain, the Five Kage.
You had no right to do that!
To have a go at it. My name is Madara Uchiha. I am here to explain something to you all.
What is it?
It's about my plan.
Even his former sensei Minato, that he truly was Madara.
What was that jutsu? Got past the highest level classified barrier. Even more than that. He undid the Nine-Tailed Seal. There's only one shinobi who can do all that. Are you, Madara Uchiha?
Corrupted by Madara's wicked and dreary outlook on humanity, he also adopted his principles on the infinite Tsukuyomi and on the shinobi world in general. As Madara so eloquently states his perspective in his speech, "Wake up to reality."
Wake up to reality. Nothing ever goes as planned in this accursed world. The longer you live, the more you will realize that the only things that truly exist in this reality are merely pain, suffering, and futility. Listen, everywhere you look in this world, wherever there is light, there will always be shadows to be found as well. As long as there is a concept of victors, the vanquished will also exist. The selfish intent of wanting to preserve peace initiates wars, and hatred is born in order to protect love. There are nexuses, causal relationships that cannot be separated. Normally, in exchange for you getting injured, another or others were saved. Isn't that so? I want to sever the fate of this world. A world of only victors. A world of only peace. A world of only love. I will create such a world, and as I told you, things in this world simply do not go as planned. In time, you'll come to realize that is truth.
This goal is now what guides Obito. He's almost entirely given up on reality and follows the teachings of his predecessor, despite knowing deep down that the path he's on isn't right. Regardless, the physical and mental trauma he's endured has warped his perspective to the point where he continues to strive towards said goal, just as Madara intended him to. Playing his role as a Madara impersonator nearly to perfection, he's abandoned his former self, his principles, and his goals for the false sentiments and ideals of a delusional man who's being manipulated just as he was. As I mentioned before, the parallels between Obito and Gaara are exhibited here, as they both serve the role as a quote-unquote "what if Naruto went bad" archetype. As a character who once longed for the acceptance of his peers, he has now become a malicious and hateful person, no longer valuing any life besides his own, unless it's for selfish reasons. This inherently isn't a boring character arc if it wasn't already done several arcs prior, during the Chunin exams in the form of Gaara. Personally, this character parallel probably annoyed me the most. After seeing the redemption of Obito towards the end of the war arc, I realized how close these parallels between Gaara and Obito's story arcs were. Now, of course, there's still differences between the two, but the issue here for me is more so focused on the theme of the story at this point. Against Gaara, Naruto learns more about empathy and cherishing those who brought him away from the depths of depression and loneliness. Scarred from his mistreatment growing up, Naruto sees a broken reflection of himself, and he realizes how easily he could have ended up walking down a similar dark path had it not been for the friends that helped him through it. Against Neji, his beliefs regarding destiny get challenged thoroughly as they battle back and forth about the concept of free will versus predestined fate. Against Haku, Naruto learns that fighting for those you care about, as opposed to just fighting for yourself, can bring out great strength as well. And against Pain, his perspective grows to understanding not only the history and issues of the shinobi world, but how he can go about fixing said issues. We can start to see a pattern here, and that is the major villains Naruto faces not only externally challenge him through physical combat, but they challenge him internally as well. A quote that I heard once stated that good villains are exceptionally talented at attacking the main character's weaknesses, end quote, challenging his beliefs to make him reflect and contemplate on them. This is usually a crucial step for the development of a story, and most of the main villains do this in new and interesting ways. Unfortunately, you don't really see this with Obito. He instead challenges Naruto in ways that we've already seen in this story. And because we've already seen Naruto overcome such hurdles, seeing it done in a similar fashion doesn't bring much intrigue to me. The redundant nature of Obito's personality and character arc is what I believe makes his story fall flat when looked at in totality. I don't doubt there are times in the story where Obito is compelling when acting as Madara, or funny and entertaining as Toby. But when you remember that he's in fact impersonating said characters, it leads me to wonder how much better Obito's character arc could have been if handled with an emphasis on individuality. As I briefly explained before, Obito even does an impersonation of the character known as Toby, whose nickname is Swirly for obvious reasons. The real Toby was an ancient victim of the previous infinite Tsukuyomi under Kaguya, then freed by Madara, and later helps Obito in his restoration after he's crushed by the boulder. Toby's personality is one that is playful, whimsical, and reckless. Literary analysis would label him as the jester character. And we see this later on as Obito takes on the alias as Toby as he joins the Akatsuki, quote unquote, posing as Toby. Obito exhibits the same personality traits as the real Toby and goes as far as to switch back and forth from his impersonation of Madara to his impersonation as Toby.
Sasuke triumphed in the battle. Itachi Uchiha is now dead.
What? I don't believe it! Kidding.
It's just as I expected.
Split personality is a type of dissociative personality disorder where the individual has two or more distinct personalities. Their thoughts and behaviors may be drastically unlike the others, and often different names are given to each personality. It is believed that childhood trauma is usually the spark of such a disorder. Interestingly enough, right before Naruto breaks Obito's mask, he yells a question asked plenty of times to Obito. Who are you? When Kakashi realizes and calls him Obito, Obito simply replies, "You can call me by that name if you want, but it means nothing to me." Another quote that stands out here is when Obito says, "I'm no one. I don't want to be anyone. All I care about is completing the Moon Eye's plan. This world is completely worthless. There's nothing left in it but misery." Look, whether or not Obito has some kind of personality disorder, I don't know. Alright, I bring it up solely as food for thought. My primary reason for making this video was to highlight just the drastic changes in personality archetypes that exist within Obito, and why I don't think he works well in this story. The redundancy of his character I spoke about before comes full circle, as he is redeemed by the same person he was made to be a darker reflection of, just like Gaara. Now, whether Kishimoto intended for Obito to turn out this way in the end is something I'm not sure about, but the fact that he did turn out in such a way ruined the character for me. The lack of originality in Obito's personality and character type proved oftentimes boring and unmoving, and this wouldn't be such an issue if Obito's role in the story wasn't so massive. Outside of Naruto himself, it's debatable that Obito may be the most impactful character in the plot of Naruto. And for such an important character to not challenge the ideals and beliefs of the protagonist in any new or interesting ways like Pain or Neji is pretty disappointing, to say the least. Instead, we're left with a watered-down, retold story of Gaara versus Naruto that essentially makes up Obito's character arc. Sure, Obito's story is tragic. I'm not saying you shouldn't like him as a character, but in hindsight, his lack of distinct personality traits and the copycat character arc leaves him being rather bland and unimaginative, in my opinion.